Howdy everyone, I'm the Shadow of the Hawk. And today being when I recorded this video, no clue what's going to come out, because my procrastination with editing is amazing. So today when I was walking home from class, I had a random thought. It was related to a bunch of other thoughts going through my brain, and then this one stuck out. Neolandia makes an amazing trade power because of its position between Duren and Delbar, as well as the fact that it is between Duren and Avenir. And then I decided, hey, you know what would be a fun series? Breaking down every single one of, all five of the human kingdoms in The Dragon Prince. Season 4 was dog shit. I will fight that opinion till the very end. But, well, the world building can't be dog shit, right? Right? Every single conclusion I came to me as someone who is not an expert in physical geography, human geography, in the formation of empires. This is all basically just information I am getting from a couple of hours of watching YouTube videos and a little bit of reading, plus a few mixes of my human geography and physical geography courses within college. The immediate thing that stands out is, well, Neolandia should not fucking exist. On screen right now, you'll be seeing a map of Xadia as a whole. On the top left, you can see Neolandia, which is described as an oppressively hot desert. Something akin to the Sahara based on the description it has and some of the pictures which you'll be seeing here. It is on the same latitude as a glacier and a tundra. It is north of a region described as a treacherous tundra. This area makes no sense. And then as we zoom in closer, we can see that its river systems also make very little sense. For one, one of these isn't even a river. It's more like a bay, bisecting and creating an island, effectively. Neolandia is closer to an archipelago than it is a part of the continent or an island, because you have rivers that cut from from the ocean to the sea, and then that sea has a strait which connects to a river, which connects to a strait, which connects to the ocean, effectively separating Neolandia from the rest of the continent, and in turn, Delbar from the rest of the continent. Even though I don't think that was the intention by the creators, they just suck at making rivers. But, okay. This is the thing. And instead of going, it just works, and assuming that some act of God created this abomination of a map, I'm going to say it was done by mortal hands. Based on using Britain as an example, with the fact that it exists as a temperate zone due to a current bringing water from the Gulf of Mexico up to Britain, warming it, even though it's on the same latitude as places in Russia, which is a frickin' icy hellhole. Britain has crops, it's temperate, it's great. It's a nice place, I think. I don't know, I hate the British. I'm an American, that's my excuse. Neolandia could have had something very similar, which kept it from being the same tundra as Delbar. A watery current from possibly some active volcanic vents to the northwest, and the current bounces off Neolandia in a way where Delbar doesn't get any of the warm water, making the area somewhat temperate. There, I imagine, due to the landmass and its relative isolation from the rest of the continent, having its west and north secure from any sort of land-based attack, I could easily see a very powerful kingdom erupting, especially if they can consolidate this power through the use of dark magic. I could easily see an arc dragon of some kind deciding, I don't like that kingdom, and pulling a thunder when he created the divide and turning this once kingdom into the state it is now. A brutal, scorching desert in a place where a tundra should be, reinforced by a mix of the magic that turned it into a desert and that warm water current I mentioned previously, keeping it in something that's like more akin to the Sahara. And then also the rivers formed because the land was destabilized by the loss of vegetation, keeping the soil in place, which led to the soil being distributed and broken up, kind of like what you're seeing in the southern Sahara as it continues to grow year by year. And this weakened soil allowed for the rivers to split at weird angles and join and overpower and break more ground, creating the odd river system that we see in Neolandia today. Is this bullshit? Yes. Is it better than it just works? Yes. So, what kind of societies would sprout in this new land, Neolandia. Newlandia. Ia is typically associated with a land of new land. Land of new land, folks. That is what Neolandia means. Is it stupider than unobtainium or transformium? You tell me. I hate this so much. But look, okay, magic bullshit created Diren and Catullus. When we get to their stories, I'll be able to share why that happened. So, magic bullshit created Neolandia. Because this action would most likely have exterminated a solid 90% of this kingdom's population. Because, you know, the kind of magic that can turn a temperate zone into a desert like that, gonna kill a lot of innocent people. And then the societal collapse afterwards, a lot of people are gonna die horrifically. I imagine you would have a very brutal, unstable first couple of years, and then as things kind of settle, you would begin to see families form into tribal groups, cousin marrying, that sort of shit, bringing people tighter together, and you would see, at least in my view, two distinct societies form. Along the rivers and in the deltas, you would see irrigation societies similar to that of Egypt. These would be very authoritarian and brutal societies with a strict martial and theological upper class, while assuming that religion matters to the humans in the world of Xadia. I'm going to say, at least for everywhere but Catullus, religion plays a factor. So this martial and theological class, which would most likely be the exact same thing, would rule over a larger worker and slave population that would be thrown into these irrigation trenches and pits, maintaining their food supplies, constructing their houses, and doing all this stuff. The irrigation, the workers and slaves would, through their brutal efforts, make their warriors and their priests bigger, taller, and healthier through good food, while also making themselves weaker due to poorer quality food and the diseases within the trenches. You would be living a short, painful, brutal life at the end of a lash to a people of giants who mock you. The other population would be oases and pastoral type groups forming up in basically anywhere. This would most likely be patches of land where a bit of stronger magic might have kept them alive, or maybe bullshit happened, or maybe by the grace of God, an oasis cropped up somehow within a couple hundred years after the collapse of everything. And you would see societies form around here. I think due to the harsh conditions and the lack of resources that these communities would have, also by their distance from each other, making them effectively strangers, you would see something akin to the Chinese Guangun practice occur, where young men would go off and fight and raid the oases and the other oases and the irrigation societies, and coming back with wealth, women, and prestige, allowing these societies to become dominated by warriors. But unlike the irrigation societies, which are going to be very brutal and despotic, these would be regions that are a lot less brutal to their own people, as, again, we see in China, or at least in the rural communities of China. The people taken as effectively slaves might even be welcomed in as the family, as they're not being taken due to being inferior, they simply were on the other end of a sword. I imagine these raids would eventually be quite similar to what the Tenguek and the Death Worlders undergo, where raids are more like seasonal games than anything else. I imagine it might even get to the point where you just have one dude fight another guy, and then whoever wins, that tribe has to give up a woman and maybe some wealth or some of the best fruit, or maybe even a prized weapon. For a little bit of extra fantasticalness added, I'm going to be also saying these tribal groups don't use metal weaponry. A concept I introduced in my own Tales of Xadia game back when I actually cared about the setting was the people of the Solfang Desert had mastered the creation of glass weaponry, which led to a combat style akin to what you see in Dune. Slashing, going for carotid, going for arteries, gaps in the armor. I would imagine using a bit of a mixture of dark magic and pseudoscience, fuck you, you would easily see these Oasis societies producing weapons made of glass. So you would have very brutal and horrific fights focused on going for gaps in linen armor and taking out carotid arteries. These would honestly be very cinematic and interesting battles to watch unfold. And TDP, if you're watching this, I would love to see this in the series, even if it's not something that would be exactly PG. These societies, due to their constant fighting and their drive to create better warriors to deal with the tribes and to raid the irrigation societies, would constantly be improving their warriors, while the irrigation societies would be trapped in this state of, we're the top dogs, we don't ever really need to worry about anything other than peasants, and as such, their warrior castes would stagnate in regards to martiality. After a couple of generations, I could easily see a Charlemagne or Genghis Khan-like figure rising up and uniting a few of the Oasis tribes and conquering one or two of these irrigation societies. I would say the most likely example of one becoming an empire would be this northern Oasis that you will see on screen circled, because that most likely would be the one that holds the largest amount of farm growth, and because it is so far away from every other kingdom, it won't have the influence of Duren, Delbar, Evenir, or Catullus weakening it or it getting conquered by their actions. Along the southwestern and northeastern coasts, and possibly the southern coastline if Delbar ever develops a mercantile seafaring population, though I doubt it, due to them being loosely inspired by the Scots, and the Scots, to my knowledge, someone could correct me in the comments, not ever really developing any sort of naval presence, but definitely Evenir, and most likely Duren, being Evenir is a swamp nation. They would have ships in Evenir, possibly having roots in Scandinavia due to their association with bees and honey. I will go over that in the Duranian video. But so on these coastlines, you would see merchantcies forming from these respective cultures, trying to create way stations for easier access to trade with the other side of the world. And you would also see the tribal and irrigation societies either assimilate or be conquered as these merchant cities grow larger and larger. I could easily see a Ptolemy-type group, foreigners coming in and taking over large chunks of the Neolandian territories, or perhaps the dynasty in that northern area expands and begins to brush up with these cities. But at some point, the Neolandian identity would form in some capacity, predominating from these irrigation and tribal societies, influencing somewhat the Evenirian and Duranian societies. Northern, central, northeastern, and southwestern Neolandia would have very different cultures, akin to how the different provinces of China have very, very different cultures to each other. I could easily see don't know where I was going to go with that. One thing of note is the mention of elephants by the Neolandian part of the book. I cannot really see the elephants playing too much of a factor in this world. Elephants, to my knowledge, were not common in the deep part of the Sahara, so they would be relegated to sites with large amounts of water, such as the coastline, and large amounts of vegetation. Again, the coastline and along the rivers. And to survive in even these conditions, they would most likely be relatively small animals, more akin to something like a rhinoceros than the Mumakil of the Haradrim. So their actual military application would most likely only be viable if waging an offensive war against Delbar, Duren, or Catullus, or within the regional location, giving that family a level of power. With all of that said, the capital, where the center of Neolandia's power is, makes no sense. It is described as the predominant trade site of Neolandia and of the international community, but where it is, I do not believe so. For one, it is too far north to really be the centralizing force of all these different cultural groups that would have formed, and it is also too far inland, too far away from the waterways to effectively be the manager of international trade. Something more like one of these locations would be where I would pick a capital, and due to the heraldry, let's go with that, of Neolandia being the elephant, I would assume it would be one of the cities in the southeast, because that's where I imagine the elephants would form due to its relative closeness to Duren, and thus a higher likelihood of vegetation for the elephants to feed upon. In regards to external politics, I do not understand why they are referred to as allies of Catullus. Catullus is on the other side of the world. At my most conservative estimates of the size of Xadia, stating that one of the larger rivers of the world is about the size of the Amazon River. The equivalent of this would be like the Normans dealing with the families of northern Spain during the Reconquista. It makes very little sense unless you're in a Rimmy Down Under video. As a result, unless of course there was a military threat that Catullus bordered, such as if Duren or Delbar were enemies of Neolandia, I don't know why I called them Evernear, but based on the book, that doesn't seem to be the case. They are direct trade partners with Duren, which makes a lot of sense. Duren would predominantly be their breadbasket, and they would provide luxury goods like the spices, gold, and jewels that are found in Neolandia, which is a part of the book that I will not begrudge too much. And if Neolandia is a martial society, it makes sense that their warriors and the warrior culture of Delbar, unlike the professional military of Catullus, would find a mutual understanding and respect, thus making those two cultures either brutal enemies or very good allies. I would even see a relationship with Evernear being more likely, as Evernear houses various exotic items that would be necessary for the Neolandian Dark Mages, as well as the fact that Evernear is most likely based off Louisianan or Floridan populations, and as such will handle spicy food better than Catullus, which again comes off more Roman or Western European. So that is my view of Neolandia. Realistically speaking, it would be a very martial society, a very martial, multicultural society centered around trade with deep ties to pretty much every nation but Catullus. And the elephants wouldn't actually be as big of an issue, more like a status symbol of the current ruling family. I imagine in 500 years, Neolandia would look very different, possibly a shift in power as the coastal settlements weaken in power and the desert nomads resurge under a new leader akin to Genghis Khan or Charlemagne, who decides it's my turn to run the empire, especially after the death of two kings of the region, or rather, the comatoseness of one king and the death of Kasif. Anyway, that is my opinion on Neolandia, my way of making it more interesting, and what a realistic look at this region would be. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment down below explaining why. If you disliked this video, leave a dislike and explain why you dislike this video. If you think I'm a hack and I don't know what I'm talking about, I would love to hear your opinion. I would love to understand it. Perhaps you're right and I'm wrong. Perhaps I'm right and you're wrong. Let's start this conversation and have a good time. Thank you all for watching. See you next time. Have a good day.